All right, Algebra 1A students, welcome to part 1 of lesson 4.2. In today's video, we're going to be talking about patterns and starting to represent patterns or functions or quantities in many different ways. Okay, in fact, we're going to look at 4 different ways in this video today. Those 4 ways are using a table of values, using words, using an equation, and using graphs. Okay? We have this problem here where they're giving us a relationship, some kind of relationship that they want us to represent. In the diagram below, they show us rectangles, and they ask us to talk about the relationship between the number of rectangles in the image and the perimeter of the figure that they form. Okay? So what we have to realize is that here in this rectangle, this side is 6, which makes this side also 6. The top is 1, which makes the bottom also 1. So the perimeter here is actually 14. Okay, the perimeter in the next one is 6 plus 6, which makes 12. There's 2 on the top, and then there's 2 more on the bottom. So 6 and 6 is 12, and 2 is 14, and 2 more makes 16. So in the second picture, my perimeter is 16. In my third picture, if I do the same thing, it's 6 and 6 and 3 and 3, which makes 18. And in my next picture, 6 and 6 and 4 and 4, which makes 20 total. So these are my perimeters, and these are my number of rectangles. Okay. What I want you to do in these types of problems is actually not worry about an equation. Okay, we're not going to worry about an equation. We are not going to write equations for these. Okay, we are going to do the other 3, however. So the first thing that you should do is create a table of values, which is going to look something like this. It's going to be right over here, and then we're going to just put letters up in each one of those for our 2 variables. And the 2 variables in this situation, obviously, are the number of rectangles, R for rectangles, and the perimeter, P, of that shape, or of that of all those rectangles put together. Okay, so R for number of rectangles, and P for the perimeter. Now, when I have one rectangle, I had a perimeter of 14. When I had 2 rectangles, I had a perimeter of 16, and so on and so forth. And I just create this table which shows not only the values that I'm talking about for my rectangles variable, but also the values for the perimeter variable that I'm dealing with here. 18, 4 rectangles meant. Okay, and now we have to start looking at the pattern. Now that we've created a table of values to show our number of rectangles and their perimeters, we have to find a pattern. So what we do is we look at the perimeter of each of these shapes, so 14, 16, 18, 20, and find a pattern in those numbers. And what I hope we can see is that each time we add a rectangle, we add 2 to the perimeter. Okay? Each time we add a rectangle, we add 2 to the perimeter. So that's the words piece of this description. So I've shown you a table of my values, my number of rectangles, my perimeter. Now I've told you what's happening here in words. Every time I add a rectangle to this picture, I add 2 to the perimeter. Okay? And now I'll create a graph. And the graph is now our first graph where we're actually going to start using some numbers. So I'm going to create a graph, just like we did in the last video, in the last section. I'm again going to make sure I label both axes. And down here, I'm going to put the rectangles. Okay, rectangles is, in this case, what I call my independent variable. it's the one that just kind of increases, right? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It just kind of goes on its own, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The other variable, which I will put along this y-axis, this up and down line, is the perimeter. And that variable depends on the number of rectangles, right? The number of rectangles I have tells me how much I'm going to have for my perimeter. So perimeter is what I call the dependent variable. Okay, just quick dependent. That's dependent, that's independent. All right, make sure that gets written down in your notes, please. Now, when I create a graph of this, I'm going to do some marking off on my rectangle axis. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's probably good enough. I could obviously have spaced those out a lot more because I only have 4 points I need to plot. But on the perimeter, what I'm going to do is I'm going to count by 2s and try to get all the way up to 20. Okay, so I'm going to count by 2s. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. Okay? Now, so this is 2, and obviously then we have a 4 next, and we go to 6, and so on, right? I'm counting by 2s on that perimeter axis. So now that I have this graph kind of constructed, I can go here, rectangle perimeters. That's my title on this graph, rectangle perimeters. Now I'm going to start plotting points. And where are the points going to come from that I plot on my x and y axis? I'm going to plot them from my table of values. They come from right over here. Okay, because I have different numbers of r for my r axis down here, my rectangles. Then I have different numbers for my p, for my perimeter axis. So at one rectangle, if I go over to 1 in the rectangles, which is right here, right? 1 in the rectangles, I need to go up to, let's see, 14 in the perimeter. So I count up 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 right there. And I put a dot right there. Right at 1 and 14. Now if I go to 2 in my rectangles axis, I need to go up to 16. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. I'm at this line right here. Okay, and then at 3 rectangles, I should be up at 18. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 right here. And obviously 4 rectangles means 20 right up top. Okay, so this set of points right here is the graph, the x and the y, the r and the p coordinates for these different shapes or these different pictures here for me. Okay, so now hopefully we can see the 3 different ways that I'm representing this situation, this relationship. I have it in a table right over here where I talk about the rectangles and the perimeters. I have it in words right here. Each time we had a rectangle, we add 2 to the perimeter. We find the pattern in our perimeters. Then I show a graph where I just make a graph, 2 axes, put some numbers on there, and plot my points right from the table. Okay? Those are the 3 things that I'm expecting you to be able to do for many, many, many different situations or relationships. Okay? In fact, let's start down here with this one. Now in this one I have a bunch of triangles that are all together, and I'm again worried about the perimeter of the figure, which means around the outside, so add up all the things around the outside, and the number of triangles. So the first thing, of course, I'm going to do, again, is make a table of values, right over here. Now this time, whoops, this time maybe I'll use T for triangle. And I'll use P for perimeter. Okay, so I want you to make a table of values for me, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the triangles, and then find the perimeters of them. Then write it for me in words. Then show me a graph, if you would please, of what exactly is going on here. So then we make a graph right over here. All right. Once you have those 3 things all done on your own to make sure you can do it yourself, then come on back and I will show you what they should end up looking like here in just a second. Okay, but pause the video for a couple minutes, make me a table of values, write some words, and make me a graph. Then come on back and I'll show you what we should have. Okay, there's a table of values. 10 for one triangle, 3 and 3 and 4. 14 for two triangles, 3, 4, 3 and 4. 18, 3, 4, 4, 3 and 4. 3, 4, 4, 3, 4, 4 makes 22. Okay, now in words, what's happening here? Well, hopefully we can see the pattern again in these perimeters. Each time I add one triangle, I add 4 to the perimeter. Right, because I keep adding one side length of 4. 4 here, 4 there, 4 down here, 4 up there. Keep adding 4 to the perimeter. Okay, and now I will make a graph right here, which shows once again on the bottom it's just triangles as my independent variable because they just keep going up, up one at a time. They just keep going up. The perimeter is what's kind of changing as I add more triangles. It's dependent on the number of triangles. And again, down on my triangles, I'll space these out a little bit more. 1, 2, 3, 4 triangles. And then up here, let's see, how high do I need to get up to 22? So again, I'll count by 2s. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22. Okay. And now I'll start plotting points from my table of values once again. Again, from over here, I take my table of values and I start plotting points. One triangle means 10 perimeter. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Right about there. Okay. And then two triangles means 14 perimeter. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Right about there. 3 triangles means 18. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. Out there. And then finally 22 for 4 triangles. Okay, so there's my graph. I have a table, I have words, I have a graph. I have represented this relationship in 3 totally different and helpful ways. If you have questions about any of this, please make a note to ask me in class about one of these pieces tomorrow. Otherwise, that's all I have for you. Have a wonderful night. Bye.